if my parents die when they are old, it will be fine because then we will have children for them to play with as grandparents. And if that is not enough for them, then they can move into a nursing home when they can easily afford to. However, if my parents die young, when it will be too much for them because there is so much life for them left that it will be too much for them to handle all at once. I really do think if one of my parents die at this age, that the other one is going to die too. I haven't told Marcus this because I know if I do, he will lose his mind and we will all go nuts on trying to find out who the return is. And I don't want that because, I know, / all other things to worry about, like school, and school is, of course, very important in this house. If our mom finds out we are beginning to struggle in school because we are trying to save and protect her, it will just stress her, because no one in our family has ever become a slacker in school, and the stress of that, because of how much she values education, the fact she has autism will mix into it, will probably just kill her because of how much stress it will cause her, and because Marcus has explained to me that stress can easily kill someone, and sometimes because autistic can make stress worse, that is why I can't tell Marcus about this. The reason I can't tell George about this is because he will do either one of three things. First, he will tell my parents or Marcus, which will easily cause what I just said, which will cause so many problems. Or second, he will have a nuclear meltdown, which is definitely not good. Or three, since he is only 6 years old, he is not old enough to understand what's going on, which really isn't a problem, except I just don't want to risk it. The reason why I can't tell either of my parents is because my parents are sensitive people, and just by bringing this up to them, they could the possibility of sending them to the hospital, or it could just cause so much damage I can't even describe it. Now, the $1,000,000 question is why do I think one of them goes, the other one will go with them? Well, the answer to that is like most of my other answers, it is long as complex, and my parents are very naive people to start. My dad has been said to be very hyperactive as a kid, and the truth of the matter is, I can see it in him still. He was very jumpy as a kid, especially when he was around my mom right when they began dating, and he is still jumpy around her, and when we don't have guests here in Robbinsog. This leads to something that Marcus has explained to me time and time again. Through Marcus's studies, he explained to me that he has been able to figure out that autistic people who get really hyper or in public are really gentle when they are in their room with things good for their sensory issues. The truth of the matter is, my mom is the best thing to ever happen to my dad's sensory issues, and just through being in hotels, I can see how gentle he is on my mom in bed. Clearly, because they are 3 biological kids, my parents are not virgins, however, but obviously I haven't seen them go all the way, but never in my life have I seen my parents sleep as normal people would. I'm not sure if Marcus has said this already, but I see my parents asleep with their arms wrapped around each other in bed. Also, my parents go to bed when they make weird noises as you're going to sleep. You sound like a mix between a typical hum and a cat purr. However, whenever I hear them make that noise, I always knew that means they were cuddling, and despite the fact that noise I'm talking about, super quiet, is pretty much screaming at the top of my lungs without screaming at the top of your lungs that they love each other with all their heart. Here are some of the patterns Marcus pointed out to me regarding what he sees and what my parents do in bed that our parents will less see. Usually my dad rests his chin on top of my mom's head because my mom is shorter, just not older than my dad, and he can see that my mom and dad can move around fine even when they are hugging each other, so even if they hug each other tightly, they can still move around, and also when they wake up in the morning, whichever my parents wakes up first, if they just stare at each other, until the other parent wakes up. And whenever they wake up, they just say good morning to each other and kiss each other. So to wrap up how all this applies to my dad, it backs up my Marcus's study that my dad, who is one of the most hyperactive people we know, though it may not be depicted like that he is one of the most gentle people we know when he is around my mom, which is very good for his sensory issues. Marcus has explained to me that how my dad is around my mom in bed could just be because he loves her so much, and that really he is just so in love with her because no typical married couples are happy with each other too, but the key words and what he just told me could just be because he hasn't seen married couples obsessed with each other like that. Now it is time to discuss patterns among my mom and her sensory issues around my dad. My mom, I think, is less hyperactive and just more crazy in general before George came into the picture. Not saying that is a bad thing because we always loved her. We just loved her more before George came into the picture. An example of that is how she is crazy. That is, I think Marcus brought up already, is how she always wears a skirt and never pants because she loves being beautiful and she feels more beautiful that way. But again, it isn't like she dresses like a slut because most of the time she wears skirts that cover everything on warmer days with no wind. She is just willing to show more. However, even with that crazy policy of hers, I find it to be totally crazy that even if she does something like what I just said, she likes being naturally beautiful. She won't put makeup on or get anything pierced. But the thing is, and despite wanting to be beautiful, but not a slut, while she refuses to wear pantyhose because it is her eyes like wearing pants, she always would never wear a bikini because she feels it is too slutty and only wears a one-piece swimsuit when we go swimming in the pool instead. That sounds to me and Marcus, because Marcus, I know, has talked about this already, like it is craziness, which can come a bit with autism. So how does my craziness affect Mom in bed? It sort of has to do with how often they repeat themselves in bed. They have never tried to sleep in a normal position, and that I think it was totally Mom's idea, because while I do think my mother is plenty crazy, I definitely think she has functioning brain cells because she is a doctor and is well educated. What I just said about my mom totally spread to my dad. There are traits that my mom started that spread to my dad. The story is whenever my parents have a bad day at work and talk about in bed, I always see one of them with a concerned look on their face, while the other one had part of the shirt they were wearing scrunched up in a ball in their hands, and once they were done telling about their bad day at work, they were done holding their scrunched clothing in their hands and snuggle the shit out of each other. I also now hear both of my parents say to each other, "You're cuddly," when they are cuddling each other in bed. But generally, I hear my mom say that a lot more than my dad originally. So now back to this question that affects the idea that if one of my parents goes, the other parent goes with it. Well, I see the answer is going to be long and complex, and that was the long and complex part of it, but now I'm going to give the actual answer. Let's say there was this log lying across the river, and if it falls into it, it would be washed away forever. But let's say that someone cut it in half and both pieces came in and both were washed away. That is how, if one of my parents goes, the other one goes with it. Because in my eyes, my parents are closer than that log when it was one piece laying over the river. However, there is one more reason that if my parents go, the other one goes with it, and it's an obvious one. It's the fact that my grandfather on my mom's side died, that my grandmother went crazy and she disappeared, and unfortunately, like divorce, that can spread very easily from generation to generation. Not all the time, definitely not all, but a good deal of the time that's what happens. However, there is one more thing that working against us that could be very different compared to my grandparents, and I mean that in the worst possible way. My grandparents were not autistic. Now here is why I said that changes things in the worst possible way. Since my grandparents did not have autism, they tended to react to bad things in a normal way for the most part, just like every neurotypical person on the planet would. The key words I just said there was for the most part, and that applies to neurotypicals who are not my grandparents too. So what that means is that they reacted to some things in a way different than other people, and in a way that other people could find to be absolutely crazy. I don't know about a choice that my grandfather made like that, but I know a choice my grandmother made like that, and that is choosing to disappear after my grandfather died, and that caused so many problems I cannot begin to tell you. However, that's not where the catch comes in. The catch comes in over the fact that my grandmother on my mom's side was wasn't neurotypical. Something as a side note that is very important to us about autism and the rest of my family is that none of my 4 grandparents had or have had it, with none of my mom's sisters' genetics among autism spreading every time. It was genetic because my parents both had autism, even though my aunts don't. My point is about how my grandmother reacted to when she disappeared after my grandfather died, is that she chose to disappear, and she did as neurotypical. Since I know for a fact Marcus, the autistic people react to things in a lot more worse way than neurotypicals do. And if one of my parents dies, as long as it is not suicide, which it won't be because we are better people than that, death is not a choice. And even if death is not a choice, if one of them dies, they'll probably be more upset than my grandfather ever was to lose her husband, because my parents are not neurotypicals. What could possibly be worse than running away from your death because your beloved spouse died? Death because of health problems brought by the stress of losing your spouse. It is worse because Marcus, I, and George will be orphans, or parents will be gone. Yes, I know Marcus is Hannah, and we still have our aunts Catherine and Heather living around the suburbs of Chicago, the city that lies just outside the door to Robbinsog. The only one of the 3 of us who could have benefited the slightest to be orphaned was Marcus, because our parents occupied the throne until they were both dead, or one abdicates the throne. If they both die, Marcus becomes king of Robbinsog. And I know he does want that a little bit, but I also know he doesn't want to get it through being orphaned. As I have stated, I personally don't want the throne at all, because I think it will just be too much for me and I know for a fact that George wants it, and the truth of the matter is that I really do think that I know that Marcus wants it to change up. Just a quick side note, that something that I find weird is that with Marcus being Doctor Marcacius and his bad behavior lately, is that he doesn't want it as much as George. However, that does not change the fact that one thing I know about my dad as a fact is that my mom means 10 times more to him than the throne to Robbinsog ever will. And and to me, that is why we need to save her if we can, because if she goes, we're going to have Marcus as king, because I feel if my mom goes, our next ruler is King Marcacius, and as much as I'd love him as a brother and a partner, the name Marcacius alone, for me, to not want him as king is because he is not mature enough yet. And he is my favorite person in the world because he is my best friend, and he is the only friend I've ever had, because our parents are not too crazy about the idea of us making new friends, clearly, because they want us to dress in their vicious hate to society. The next several months were with solving these riddles and figuring out who the return is, could lead us down the craziest road in my entire life. Actually, I'm going to change one thing about what I just said. It will lead us down the craziest road of our entire life, and it could be for all for nothing. Just to remind you, we don't know who the return is. My main goal is to save our mother's life, and for all we know, they could be leading us to the riddle, to our deaths, but whatever we do, yes, I know I have said already many times, but I'm going to say again, we can never let our mom find out, because someone innocent or the person trying to save mom's life could be thrown behind bars. I cannot let school become less of a necessity because of this. But I am going to do whatever I can to the next several months to get this done. Lately, I've been doing my leftover homework on the ride back to the loop on the pink line, and most of the time I've been getting it done, and it has been because I have a good length of study hall, and the thing about that is it saves me so much time. My main goal now is for Samuel Arnold Robbins, to succeed with my brother Marcus Philip Robbins, to save my brother's life along with my brother George, do it in the most secretive way possible. But not as a brother, and not even as a friend, and not even as a mentor, but as the most important thing I can be to Marcus, especially, and that is a partner.